everyone. It's Michelle Caruana from Play Cafe Academy and Profitable Play. And this is going to be another subscriber Q&A where I'm answering a question that I get all the time from you, whether it's on this channel or in my email inbox or on Instagram. And this is one that I get a lot. So I'm really excited to bring this information to you on this channel today. We are going to talk about the pros and cons of buying a space versus renting a space. And I'm going to give some examples and share my personal perspective on this. But before we get into the good stuff and I answer this question, I wanted to first remind you a couple things. Number one, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so that you never miss a video. I have so many amazing videos coming up for you that I already have done and scheduled, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. They're some of my favorite videos that I've ever put together, and they're going to be so helpful for you in your journey. So if you haven't subscribed yet, that's number one. And the second thing that I wanted to remind you of is, as you can see, I love answering your questions on this YouTube channel. So if there is something that you're wondering about or a topic that you want me to cover, you can comment on this video or feel free to reach out to me on Instagram. My profile and all of my website and resources and freebies and courses, all of that, all those links that you need to contact me are in the video description. So right under where you see this video, there's going to be a ... You can expand that. All that stuff and all the ways to contact me are in that video description. All right, without further ado, let's talk about the pros and cons of buying a space. And again, we're going to get right into it. All right, let's first talk about buying a commercial space. So some pros, right? The upsides. Number one, long-term investment. So when you buy a commercial building, you are making a long-term investment in your business. You will own the property, which can appreciate in value over time, and you'll have control over the space. Next is equity building. So as you pay off your mortgage, you are building equity in the property. This means you will have more assets to use and leverage for future business ventures, whether you want to open multiple locations, franchise your business concept, or maybe open another business or something similar entirely. Next is tax benefits. So buying a commercial building can offer tax benefits such as mortgage interest deductions, property tax deductions, and depreciation deductions. So this is an area where I would really suggest hiring help when you're doing your taxes. I would say this whether you are leasing or buying, but especially if you're buying, because again, there are a lot of tax benefits that an expert will help you take advantage of. Next is customization. So when you own a commercial building, you have the freedom to make any necessary modifications to suit your business needs. This can include adding or removing walls, upgrading equipment, and more. So for example, if you want to add plumbing for a cafe or something like that, you don't have to go through landlord approval in order to do that. So again, this is a huge perk for people who really want to create a space that is suited to their business needs. And then finally, potential rental income. So if you have extra space in your commercial building, you can rent it out for additional income. And a lot of people might be listening and thinking, well, I can really do that whether I lease or buy. But let me tell you, most leases will have pretty strict restrictions when it comes to how you can lease or license or subcontract your space out and gain actual income revenue from it. So a lot of landlords are really specific, again, about the restrictions around this. And it's definitely going to really put a lot of handicaps around what you can actually do when it comes to making additional rental income from your space. But all of that is not going to be a concern, again, if you purchase your building. All right, so some cons of buying a commercial space. Number one, upfront costs. So buying a commercial building requires a significant upfront investment, right? There's no way of getting around that. And that includes a down payment and closing costs. So a lot of people know that you have to put a down payment when you purchase a building, but a lot of people forget about legal costs and closing costs, and all of that can really add up really quickly. Next is maintenance and repair costs. So as the owner of the building, you are now responsible for all maintenance and repair and the costs associated. And this includes HVAC systems, plumbing, electrical, and more. And this also includes snow removal, landscaping, window washing. You might need to take out additional insurance policies for flooding or fire or whole building insurance. So, all of your costs are going to absolutely skyrocket when it comes to maintenance, repair, and especially insurance. So, definitely look into that. And there's no more, just picking up the phone and calling your landlord to come fix your toilet if somebody stuffed a diaper in it. And trust me, I promise you, if you're not open yet, people will try to shove diapers down the toilet. I will never understand it, but nonetheless, people absolutely do it. So now you're responsible for all of those costs. And in the case of a diaper toilet situation, that can cost thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So, whereas you would normally be able to call your landlord, you are now footing that bill and arranging any necessary repairs, which can be a big burden both mentally and financially. Next is market fluctuations. So, the value of commercial real estate can fluctuate and it will fluctuate with the market. So, this means that your investment may not appreciate as much as you had hoped, or it could even decrease in value. So, again, if you purchased a building for 500,000, if you might decide to go sell it in a couple years, depending on the market, it could only be worth $400,000. So, this is definitely something, again, ask for help from an expert if you need it, but just keep this in mind that the cost of these buildings and the value doesn't always appreciate. Next is limited flexibility. So, when you own a commercial building, you are committed to that location pretty much, right? So, this can limit your flexibility to move to a more strategic location as your business needs change. So, I just recently put out a video about breaking your lease or walking away for, whatever the reason might be, whether that's because your business isn't doing well financially or whether it's because you are bursting at the seams and need a bigger space. Again, if you're walking away or breaking a lease, there are going to be some repercussions and some things that you're going to have to deal with, both, financially and contractually, but it's going to be a lot easier and there's going to be less repercussions to move spaces if you're leasing as opposed to buying. And a lot of times, leases are only, 2, 3, 5 year leases. So if you are bursting at the seams and you're doing really well, it's very easy to just walk away from your location at the end of your lease. So again, not breaking it early in the scenario, just walking away at the end and moving to a different location. If you purchase your building, again, you're going to have to sell it, you're going to have to fix it up, you're going to have to deal with potentially taking on a tenant, that whole entire process. So it is very cumbersome to, again, move spaces if you buy. And then next is management responsibilities, as I kind of alluded to already. So, as the owner of the building, you're responsible for managing the property, including, again, finding tenants, collecting rent, and handling any legal issues. So, if you're subletting any of your space, or if you're all of a sudden purchasing a building that already has existing tenants, that's going to be something that you're going to have to spend time and energy and money managing. All right, now that we talked about all of the pros and cons of buying a commercial space, I want to get into the pros and cons of leasing because honestly, there are just going to be more opportunities to lease likely than buy in your area. I know that when we were looking to open our business, we were really looking to buy. We wanted to build equity in that asset. We wanted to make sure that, again, we had something to sell if we ever decided to walk away or pass the torch in our business or anything like that. And that's the reason that in another YouTube video, I'll link it in the video description. But in another video, I talked about how we negotiated a right of first refusal in our lease agreement terms. And what that means is if our landlord ever decided to put our building on the market for purchase, we as the tenant would have the first opportunity to either buy it or say, no, thank you. And that's how serious we wanted to buy, or that's how serious we were about wanting to buy our building. So if you're a little bit discouraged, if you really are interested in buying, but there just aren't a lot of commercial spaces available for you to buy, don't lose hope. Because more often than not, landlords end up putting their spaces on the market at one time or another. Not always, but there is a pretty good chance of them eventually wanting to sell their building. So, including the right of first refusal in your lease agreement, again, gives you that option to at least be the first one to turn it down. And in our agreement, it basically said that our landlord couldn't even market the building, whether it be on a listing site or with an agent, until we explicitly said that we didn't want to buy it. So he had to give us the option to put in an offer first. We had to negotiate, go through that whole process. And we actually had to put in writing that we didn't want to buy it. So, again, if you're feeling a little bit discouraged because there's not a lot of opportunities to buy, there are ways to think outside the box. And while you may not necessarily be able to buy right now, there are smart ways to make that option a lot more likely in the future. All right, so now that's out of the way, let's again talk about the pros and the cons of leasing a commercial space because that's going to be much more common. All right, let's talk about leasing a commercial building. And first, the pros. So, number one, lower upfront costs. So, leasing a commercial space requires a lower upfront investment compared to buying a building. Next is flexibility. So, leasing a commercial space offers more flexibility in terms of location and size. So, if your business needs change, you can easily move to a new building or expand, or again, look at a smaller space, depending on what your business needs are. And the next, maintenance and repair costs. So, as a tenant, you're typically not responsible for maintenance and repair costs. And again, this is going to be dependent on if you have like a triple net lease or a gross lease, but typically landlords are responsible for any of these, again, ongoing maintenance and repair costs. Next is lower risk. So, leasing a commercial space carries less risk than buying a building. As I mentioned, if the business fails, you can simply walk away from the lease without significant financial repercussions. And again, I'm going to link the video in the description of this video where I talk about the 6 different scenarios that can happen if you do decide to walk away from your lease or break your commercial lease. And then next is shared resources. So, in a lease space, you may have access to shared resources such as conference rooms, break rooms, and more. And you may be able to take advantage of a shared parking lot. The landlord may be paying for snow removal and landscaping and things like that. So, there is the opportunity for shared resources. All right, some cons of leasing your commercial space. This one is going to be obvious, again, if you listened a few minutes ago, but no equity building. So, when you lease a commercial space, you're not building any equity in the property and you're not building any assets for yourself. You're essentially paying rent to the landlord with no long term return on investment. So, you're helping them build equity in their building, right? You're not building your own. Next is less customization options. So, as a tenant, you have limited control over the space. You may not be able to make necessary modifications to suit your business needs. Next is limited control. So, when you lease a space, you're subject to the terms and conditions of the lease agreement, and you kind of have to work within those boundaries. This includes restrictions on things such as signage, operating hours, what you can and cannot serve, depending on if any of the other tenants of the landlord have non compete agreements or anything like that. But this could mean significant restrictions on how you run your business, which not everybody likes or appreciates. And then next, and this one is really important, and that's potential rent and ownership changes. So rent may increase over time. Again, if you're not locking in a rate in your lease, definitely pay attention to this. And that makes it difficult to plan for long-term expenses. And also, if your landlord ends up selling your building, you could have a brand new landlord that you have to deal with. They could want to renegotiate the lease. And at this point, you're at a huge disadvantage because you've already poured a ton of money and effort into building out your space, putting equipment there, getting the word out about your space, establishing a loyal customer base. So they have the upper hand when it comes to renegotiating these lease agreements. So they could raise your rent, they could really restrict you in terms of how you're able to run your business, all that kind of thing. So be really careful again when you're signing a lease. Ask what happens if the property changes hands. Maybe put a right of refusal in there if you plan on purchasing your building at some point, which I already talked about in another part of this video. And just make sure you're protecting yourself. And if that means locking in specific rent increases over the, let's say, 5-year term of your lease, that might be very smart because you don't want to get hit with a large, unexpected rent increase. Trust me. And then finally, limited rental income. So typically, you're not going to be able to rent out any extra space for additional income as the landlord is the one who is responsible for managing the property. And again, this is all typically, there are going to be different situations depending on all of the different landlords and potential landlord tenant, relationships and different lease terms and things like that. But again, these are typically the pros and cons of buying versus leasing. All right, so that wraps up our conversation of buying a commercial space versus leasing. And there are some options that I didn't really touch too much on. Like, for example, Christine from Sweet Pea's Play Cafe in Kokomo, Indiana, she actually built her entire building from scratch. So she purchased some land and she built an entire building that was completely built to suit her needs and specifications. So she actually took it a step further and now she's building equity in the asset. And she can always turn around and sell that or lease it if she chooses to for whatever reason, if she outgrows her space or anything like that happens. And something that I wanted to kind of end this conversation with is if you've ever listened to the McDonald's story and how that empire came to be, or if you've seen one of my favorite movies, which is called The Founder, you'll know that especially, if you're looking to expand your business through licensing or franchising or anything like that, if you watch that movie, The Founder, or know about the McDonald's story, you probably remember the phrase that McDonald's wasn't a fast food business. They made most of their profit and most of their income from purchasing land and purchasing buildings and renting that back to their franchisees. Or in this case, if you decide to go the licensing route, your licensees. So that's also something that I really want you to keep in mind as you decide which of these options is right for you. And again, whether you're looking to open your first location or your third or fourth location, I want you to keep both your short term goals and long term goals in mind. So, again, while purchasing may not be in the cards for you right now, whether it be to a poor credit score or a lack of credit history or the lack of funds for a down payment or closing costs or anything like that. Again, that's not to say that you can't ultimately purchase in the future, whether it's purchasing your current building or whether it's through expansion or licensing or franchising. So, again, if you haven't watched the movie The Founder, that is one of my favorite entrepreneurial movies. It will give you so much motivation and so much drive. I might go watch it after this. Again, it's one of my favorites. Can't recommend it enough, whether you're looking to, again, learn more about purchasing real estate or creating an optimized business or standard operating procedures or workplace culture. Again, can't go wrong with The Founder. So thank you so much again for watching my video. Sorry I got off on a little tangent there, but again, this is one of the questions that I get asked the most. So I really wanted to address it here on this channel. If you have any questions or need anything clarified, please feel free to comment below this video. I answer every single comment that I see. And again, my contact information, my website, my courses, my Instagram handle, all that is linked in the video description. So again, thank you so much for being here. Subscribe if you haven't yet, because I will be right back here with another video shortly. Bye for now.